looking to get approved. I think we are
Tony,
ready. Yep.
Yeah. Okay, Patrick, you're good to go. Cable.
He's on mute.
Yep.
Yes, you're all set.
Okay.
Okay. Let's get it started then.
All right. So thank you, everyone. So lots have happened since the last time the committee got together. Just for refresh your memory, I'm Brian Jarvis, Project Director for Compass. Also with me tonight is Tony Pina, Project Manager for the Bird Middle School project. We'll also be introducing the architect team from TAP A Architects, and they'll be on. We have Chris Blesson and Charlie Hay there. They'll be on to tell us a little bit about themselves. We'll give you an update of how far we've come since the last time we met, the project timeline moving forward from here over the next few months into the fall and into the winter. Just a refresher on the feasibility stage, which is what we're in right now with the MSBA. The PDP stage, which will be the first deliverable to the MSBA, will refresh that and explain a little bit more of the next steps, and just give a high-level overview of some of the meetings that are going to be happening, both from a school committee, building committee, town level, and community over the next several months, leading up to eventually a town meeting, but some of the decisions that need to be made prior to that. So without any more intro, I'll turn it over to Tony, and he can take us through the first couple slides.
Okay, great. I just wanted to welcome everybody. I know you're probably spending more time in front of your computers as of late, especially for meetings. So in an effort to keep things going on the project, which we've lost no time due to the pandemic, we've also taken to virtual platforms like the one tonight. So what we'll do is I'll go through these slides, and maybe I'll ask if anyone has questions about any part of what we're discussing before we go to the next slide. And then I don't know if there's a raise hand or if you just want to jump in and ask at the end of each slide if you have questions. So we're going to take you back probably close to where the last time we left off when we met with the building committee. A lot's happened, and a lot of good things. Back in March, we came before you to ask about bringing David Stevens of New Vista on board ahead of the architect design team. So typically, David Stevens is an educational programmer, so typically they work as a consultant to the architect once they come on board. We decided to go ahead because of the timing through the summer and bringing the architects on right at the end of the school year to sort of get a head start on the visioning process, which ended up being a really beneficial thing to the district. And in fact, the MSBA ended up attending all of the workshops, and they were very intrigued about this idea about starting this process with the district ahead of bringing the architects on board. David, you probably remember his resume and his qualifications that we talked about before we actually hired him. He works with all of the major design firms on MSBA project, and he's worked quite a bit with TAP A. So we did begin the visioning process. We held 2 workshops, and we had a good participation, all virtual, with the district and the school admin. This was timed out during the process where we were receiving the RFS responses from all the designers. The deadline to receive all of the responses was April 15th. So we received 12 responses, which is the most in recent submissions to the MSBA for a project like this. So we did quite a bit of work trying to vet all 12 firms, look at their presentations. We called and did numerous designer references and checked recommendations. We submitted all those to the MSBA, and that culminated in a meeting with the MSBA of the designer selection panel on May 19th. We attended that meeting, and TAP A rose to the top, not just among the district, but among the entire panel. TAP A received quite a few votes to the point where the DSP decided with a vote that they wouldn't necessarily require interviews as long as everybody on that panel was okay with it. They did vote, and it was a pretty overwhelming vote. I think it was 11-2 or 12-1 or something like that to forego the interview process. I think COVID and the ability to meet in person played into that, but it really helped us on schedule to push ahead. We negotiated a contract with TAPE in the district in early June and brought them right on board sort of seamlessly. They got caught up with David of New Vista behind the scenes, and then we culminated that with this step, which was we had an education, ed visioning debriefing with them and the district on June 16th. Before that, and sort of a typical thing that the MSBA does is once you have a designer on board, they hold a kickoff meeting that was also held virtually, so we lost really no time there. They take us through and explain to the district the various steps in the schematic design process, which we'll go through tonight a little bit more in detail. All of that has allowed us to begin work actually on site with some of the surveys, including a site survey of Bird and Johnson. We've also done a hazardous materials survey. On Thursday, tomorrow, we're going to start geotech, which is some borings that they'll do at the school to test soil conditions, as well as a second part of a hazmat study that will be done inside the school. So in the meantime, we've also been continuing work with the ed visioning and begun an outline of the ed program. And before the end of August, we'll come up with a space summary, which we'll talk a little bit about later. So we really haven't lost any time, despite everything that's going on around us. And so we've been very happy to have TAPE on board kind of seamlessly. On the call or in the committee meeting tonight, we have Chris Blesson and Charlie Hay. We've worked with them before on some projects, most recently in Millis. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce TAPE Associates.
Hey, thanks, Tony. This is Chris, just chiming in here. If you want to stop sharing your screen,
Yep.
I can share
There you
mine.
go.
Charlie's also on the call. I don't know if Charlie wants to introduce himself.
Yep, we have a moment for that coming up.
Oh, perfect.
So we basically took some sheets out of the proposal. We didn't go crazy making a whole new interview presentation or anything like that, but we wanted to just kind of walk you through some things that you might have already seen, but talking about them helps you get acquainted with us in a way that is a little bit more personal. So we are TAPE architects, and one of the things that we really strive for is just making environments that positively affect people, and it's the core of our practice. I'd say probably 90% of our work really goes to the education market, and then we have other work that's in basically libraries and other kind of public spaces, but most of our effort is really around education spaces in schools. So that's what we're focused on. Charlie and I have been working together for I don't know, probably about 13 years by now, I guess, and somewhere around in there. Experience with this firm, 12.5 years. And I have done a number of schools over that period of time. And on this project, I will be the principal in charge. And that may not mean much to you. It doesn't have to mean much to you, except that I'll be the day-to-day contact and sort of face of the firm. You'll see me at most of these meetings, and Charlie will come when he is needed or has or time or other things, but he'll be involved as well. And so Charlie, if you want to introduce yourself.
Good evening. We're delighted to be doing this project and very excited to be doing it, and we thank you for that. As Chris said, he will be the face of the firm, and you'll see a lot more of Chris than you will of me. However, I will be involved and have been so far. My role will probably be more in terms of sort of quality control, design, and consultant coordination while Chris is really doing a lot of the programming and the meetings. And this is not inconsistent with how we've treated other school projects, and we have kind of flipped back and forth in terms of who is the client contact and who isn't. And on this project, Chris is the client contact. But I've been with TAPE for 25 plus years, a vast majority of my career, and I have done many, many public schools over that time. The firm has a lot of experience, as you probably know, given that you selected us, and we're very excited about this project.
Thanks, Charlie. Other people that you might hear from time to time are Matt and Wendy, but I don't think you'll hear or see much of them during these early phases. Matt is really a PM type kind of role, and in the office, and Wendy is our interior design director. And the way things work at TAPE, which is maybe slightly different than some other firms, is that the principals are we operate as high-level PMs, so we're involved from day one until closeout, and the Compass team can tell you that Charlie is actually closing out Millis right now. No one else is, and so we track from day one to actual completion, and that's something that we like to do that helps ensure quality and presence and service to our clients. And I think that's what you'll see on this project as well. Just walking through a couple of recent schools, Galvin Middle School actually rose to the top with your district team, the administrators, and this is one middle school that basically mirrors the exact student population, or pretty close to what we would be talking about for a combined school. And although this was a 5 through 8 school and yours would be a 6 through 8, there's a lot of similarities between this school and what might become a new bird school or combined school in Walpole. Stoneham Middle School was another school that we did that was actually an addition renovation project, and so there was a portion of the project that became renovated, and then we added a lot more to that project. And so this is an example of a middle school that actually had that add reno component to it. The space down here on the bottom left was a gym in its previous life, and so it got turned into a media center, which was a kind of neat transformation there. Another middle school here that was actually it's attached to the high school in Melrose. The middle school is on the left here, this big portion, and the high school's on the right. And so the approach here was to rebuild a more kind of historic building, and so there's elements of the old school incorporated throughout the design of this middle school. But just to kind of keep the conversation going about the target range of around 900 students, produces a certain size school, and some interesting components that we were able to include inside of that. Lunenburg Middle High School is another combination that it's as it says, but the last two here are just kind of showing different ways to do the middle school combination or layout for building. And so we're at Middle High School here as well. And you heard me just slip and say Sharon is because we're putting out construction documents for Sharon right now. And that's one of my projects, which enables me to be close to Walpole all the time. And this is like the perfect moment where the two are neighboring towns, but also the moment in time where the principals start to pull up new projects. So this is a great, Walpole being my project the principal in charge of, it's a great timing for us. Some of the more interesting things we wanted to talk about is just how schools are laid out. And you saw some of this narrative in the presentation that we did, in the proposal. And we talked a lot about this with the district just last week. Different ways to lay schools out. And so we do with school to make a more inviting sort of 21st century school, and that's what we plan to look for and look into as far as middle school design goes for Walpole. And some of the interesting components about Melrose Middle School and was that we were able to do some vertical connections, and that's something we like to look for in school design, is just how you connect vertically across floor plates, but also programmatically. And this had a pretty interesting STEM component to it. So had CAD labs, had TV labs, had business suites, and it also had an innovation lab and blended learning, all sort of circulating around a media center in the middle. And so it's kind of an interesting way to put a lot of STEAM components together should we find that the middle school programs need to incorporate a lot of that. Looking at the Bird Middle School site, we know that that there's going to be a lot of phasing involved, probably no matter how we cut it. And so looking at ad renos or new schools, it's going to be a tight fit on that site. And so this slide just kind of goes over some planning and logistics, and again showing Wakefield, which was interesting because we built it literally into the courtyard of the existing building and had an operating, fully functional school all the way around it. And so that was sort of a challenging problem to figure out, but we managed it. And then you tore down the old building and built the rest. So there's a lot of different ways to work around what's there and make it doable for teaching and learning that has to continue while we have a building project going on. And then in the site program, talked about, or in the proposal, and we understand the Bird Middle School is kind of primary look and primary desire right now. But we are also obligated by the MSBA to take a look at the Johnson site and see what might be available there. So that's sort of what we're showing here, and some of what you'll see in the upcoming design work that we're going to do over the next few months. And that's really all we had. I guess if you have questions, we can take them and answer them.
Any questions for Chris or Charlie? All right. Tony, want to move on?
Yeah, let's keep going. So this is just a snapshot of where we are in the grand scheme of things with the MSBA. This blue box represents the entire feasibility or schematic process, which is the larger part of what we're doing with the MSBA. It's comprised of three major steps. The first one is the preliminary design program, which is the phase we're in now. At this phase, we basically do a lot of surveys of the existing sites that we might be exploring for the school. And then when we go to this preferred schematic report, this is narrowing down the options and picking the district's #1 choice to pursue. And then additional work is done on that choice with budgets and a lot more exhaustive work. And that culminates in a funding agreement that's coupled obviously with a town vote. So we're in this part of the process here. We've luckily made it through this designer selection process, which is a pretty major milestone. That just means we have all the members of the team present, and now we can actually focus on the project. The preliminary design program, we're slated to submit that to the MSBA in mid to late November. So that's the target. The MSBA knows about our work plan and what we're trying to accomplish. Then we will move on, after we get comments from them, to the PSR phase, which we're doing a little early in order to time out a little better with board votes with the MSBA, and then eventually we'll get to in late summer of 2021 the final SD report. The preliminary design program, these are the major deliverables, and you've heard me talk about this educational program. This is something that's spearheaded by the district, by the school administration, in conjunction with the school committee. The initial space summary is basically a tally of all of the square footages of each type. And this is an important piece because the MSBA bases their funding on reviewing this document. Like I mentioned before, we're well underway with the evaluation of existing conditions, which includes surveys at both schools, the different explorations that I talked about earlier, both geotech, hazmat, a code and narrative summary that TAPE will be involved in doing. We will frame all the different options of each of the different components that we're considering. So the MSBA has 8 required options. Just to give you a quick summary of those, there are 3 at Johnson. We have to do these per the MSBA. We have to consider these and present them to the MSBA, which would include a base repair option at Johnson, an ad reno at Johnson, and new construction at Johnson for a consolidated enrollment. And then we have base repair at Byrd for both a 450 student school and the consolidated option, along with the ad reno and new construction. So they just want to see all the different options so that they know that the district understands all the pros and cons of each different option. Once we put all of this together and submit it in November, then we move on to these next phases. Just to give you a snapshot of the progress that we've made on the PDP to date, the educational program, like I mentioned at the outset, we've completed 2 of the 3 visioning workshops. We have another workshop and a community forum to engage the community, which may have to happen virtually in late September, early October. TAPE is, like Chris mentioned, we've just begun work on very preliminary design of how we want the school, no matter where it ends up, how we want it organized. Again, we have completed quite a bit of this evaluation piece, and that'll be ongoing. Hopefully not too far into the school year. We're shooting to try and get that done before September, maybe first, second week of September. Again, the preliminary evaluation of alternatives, these will be a list of options with a good amount of information of pros and cons for each option, which obviously will have to be done by the end of October for submission in November. So does anyone have questions on where we are in the process? I know some of the building committee members are obviously attend our project team meetings bi-weekly, so this is nothing new for Bridget and Patrick and Mark and some of the others. So if anyone on the committee has questions about where we are, like we talked about, nothing is being decided about what site yet or what type and size school. These are all things that will get presented to the MSBA and will be worked on in the next phase, like narrowing down. So there obviously no decisions have been made. This part of the schematic feasibility phase, this particular stage is more about information gathering and just allowing the MSBA to know that we are exhausting all options and are creating a good wealth of knowledge to choose from.
All right, so any questions on that?
I got a quick question.
Go ahead.
One of the things I think we've talked about all along that's going to be key to this, particularly when we come to the town vote, is that there's going to have to be significant buy-in from the community. And one of my concerns is with COVID and virtual meetings and so forth like that. First of all, when are you going to start to have significant numbers of meetings for feedback? I see you have some feedback in there right now in this preliminary phase, but you're going to have significant amounts of community outreach. And that was one of the things that we've talked about all along.
Yeah,
so during phase 2.
Yep. So we do have this slide here represents a snapshot of some of the outreach that we're going to do. We do have a plan to have a district visioning session in late September, and then in early October have our first community forum. I know it's hard to get our heads around doing a virtual type meeting like this, but what we've actually performed quite a few of these at this point, community outreach meetings and forums. And we've actually seen, surprisingly, that more people are attending using the virtual platforms in a lot of ways than if you have it in person. We're able to chart and record who's at these meetings. And it seems like people being able to do this from the comfort of their own home is actually a benefit. Like I said, we've had quite great numbers in the virtual platform type meetings. So we agree, like the outreach will be key, and you can see this cluster of getting the word out about where we are in the process, and then also right after we submit the PDP, getting all the information out that we've gathered to the community. Again, no decisions are being made at this stage, so it's mostly disseminating the information that we gather. And then as we get closer to submitting the PSR, we obviously wouldn't want to make a choice of an option without getting community buy-in, like you said. So this third community forum, sort of in the beginning of the year before we get going with submitting to the MSBA, would be another key. And if we do have some a virtual community forum, we don't see a good amount of participation, we could also schedule a subsequent one. I know that Patrick in the district really does have a finger on getting the word out, so I think we'll have some success with that, but we will stay flexible just in case.
Right, and Jack, and also add to that, like there's going to be, you'll see, I think in one of the later slides, there's going to be regular updates not only to this committee, which are public, but also the school committee, in addition to these targeted community forums. But in addition to the community forums, I think in the March presentation, we had a whole matrix of kind of different ways to get information out. But these are the times, these red stars you see, these are the times where we really start to hit, getting the word out, leading up to the decision in the PSR, and then obviously leading up to town meeting, that whole run up. I mean, we've done presentations just about to every civic group you can think of in towns for schools, as many as possible, or as many as that are needed. So there will be ample opportunity for people that are interested to get that information.
Okay, thank you.
And everything also is being distributed through the district's website. So the goal is that all this information is up and public and easily accessible.
Yeah, so for instance, this presentation will also land on the website, along with everything that we've been doing. That we've also been posting a monthly dashboard to bring the community up to date on progress that we've made. So, Nancy, did you have a question?
Yeah, I have a comment, and then my question is connected to what Jack was just asking about. The comment is just, when you have to evaluate, and I'm glad you have to evaluate the Johnson site, do you realize that the town wells are in the backyard of Johnson?
Yep.
Okay.
Right. So Nancy, so the MSBA is making us look at 8 options, and it's strictly because one, obviously a base renovation to Johnson, the project is for the bird, so they're only doing that base renovation option for an information gathering as a comparison. And when we actually start to look at these options, we'll have a whole matrix of things that are pros and cons of each site. That obviously being a con for the Johnson site, it's going to severely limit the buildable area of that site. So that will show up and most likely be a negative against possible options at that site.
Okay, thanks. So my question is related to community feedback and involvement. We're a town that just can't have enough of that. Like, in general, people just want to be asked. They come along best if you bring them along. I'm sure you've seen that in other towns too. But mentally, because of COVID, you might have been posting things, but even I didn't think to look. So the average community person isn't tuned into the fact that we're talking about this project. So I think, note to us as school committee that even though we're talking a lot about opening the school in September, we've got to start building messages into our meeting also about that. So we can do that, but I guess my question is, there are a couple of pieces to this. One is how do you build a good middle school? But the second is, how does our community feel about combining 2 schools into one? And so this community forum that you're talking about, a couple of questions. Would the community forum try to tackle those both things on the same night? And if not, well, let's just start with that. Would you do them on the same night?
So I'll take that. So Nancy, the first community outreach that we're going to do is really part of the visioning process. So we've done 2 of the workshops with David Stephen related to visioning, is really with the administration and the staffs of the 2 middle schools, with kind of that 30,000 foot, what makes a good middle school, what makes a good middle school for Walpole, where does Walpole see itself going, so that we can align that vision with the ed program. So then we actually, when we show the blueprints of or concepts of a school and the MSBA reviews it, they say, yes, this aligns with Walpole's vision. This isn't, you're not building some space that maybe you've never done that before, or you're just, throwing stuff at the wall, like you've really thought through this. That first community meeting, though, is now to bring in some of the community members to say, hey, this is the information that the district's education team has come up with, and we're getting that feedback from the community of kind of what makes a good middle school, community elements to that school, public spaces, in addition to educational. And then we're going to take that feedback and move into kind of putting together that first deliverable. So, from that perspective, then you move into the options of, a good middle school, whether it's consolidated or not, is going to have these elements. It's just going to be the scale of those elements. So that first meeting is literally, let's talk about what makes a good school for the town of Walpole. And then we'll move on from there, and we'll talk more about, on this slide here, we kind of have the enrollment question broken down of when we need to make those decisions and what meetings will need to be present at where we have to make those decisions. So Tony, I don't know if you want to walk through this, then we can answer your second question, Nancy.
Yeah, so this is directly related to what Nancy's asking. We're not just coming up with what makes a good middle school, but we're also at the same time framing this question about enrollment. So here, this is just a slide that captures, obviously, these community forum meetings are in red, and these are obviously the minimum amount that we would have. If we needed to add more, we would. But like Brian said, just to get through the PDP, we do have a forum, not to talk anything about site-related, which school, where it's going, but just to talk about, in general, the overall things that we've learned from the visioning process about what components are very important and what relationships do we want to have in Walpole for a middle school. And so that first community forum will be a culmination of all those visioning sessions, and also to garner feedback and some part of the vision from the community. So we will be trying to get whatever concerns or ideas that come to the forefront at that forum. And then obviously, the school committee will need to approve the final ed plan so that it can be submitted. And then obviously the building committee would vote to approve the PDP, the preliminary design report, and submit it to the MSBA. So there'll be a draft of all this information out there in the community, and it will be, available for people to look at and for the building committee to kind of read through and make sure they understand everything. At the same time, while we're going through this, the first stage of the PDP, we're also going to be beginning this discussion about enrollment. So you can see the building committee, not just tonight as part of this discussion, but also in future meetings going into the fall, discussing pros and cons about the idea about consolidating, bringing 2 schools together. And then obviously this will continue to come up at school committee meetings, but the second community forum is specifically designed not just to present all the information we gathered in the PDP, but also to begin that discussion with the community about this decision about enrollment. So we definitely have it, we catch our breath a little bit after the submission of the PDP, and then circle back to the community while the architects continue their work on design. Again, the yellow meetings are obviously school committee, building committee. The red meetings are more designed for the public. And then that process continues. Like in the preferred schematic, obviously, we've talked about, we want to get buy-in on whatever option we decide to go forward with. So we do feel it is critical and maybe just like you said, getting the initial word out about where we are in the process, so that people do start to pay attention as we move forward. Will probably be one of the bigger hurdles to jump over, especially now that we can't meet in person, at least for the foreseeable future.
Right, and we really teed that up. We kind of talked through that a couple times. Like initially, we targeted doing a booth at Walpole Day. Obviously, that was canceled, but we thought we also wanted to do a community presentation when we had some material to present, and that was really getting those first two workshops done to say this is what the school is thinking, and then we tee it up in September when everyone's back to somewhat of a normal schedule as much as possible, where they can actually start focusing on this and people are back from summer mode. So as you can see, it is going to be a very busy fall and early winter as far as meetings, both between school committee, this committee, and then whatever we do outside of that from a public perspective, because some of these decisions based on enrollment, it's a big decision and it does happen, relatively quickly. We're talking over the course of 4 to 6 months, where by the time you get to a preferred schematic report, meaning what's the preferred option for the project, you need to know, is that a combined school or not a combined school? And once we submit that into the MSBA, they also want to know, what the town is thinking about for, maybe Johnson if it's not going to be a school anymore. But this gives you a good sense, and we'll start to fill in these details, but it is going to be a busy fall with some of these discussions, starting basically as soon as people get back from summer.
If they've gone anywhere.
And mentally, people are still in summer.
Yeah,
so.
totally.
Thank you.
Bridget, anything? Want to add to that?
No, that's great. Thank you. We're busy anyway, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah,
Just
I know.
keep it coming.
Tony, so I don't know if we skipped over anything getting to that slide, but
No, I think Nancy might. Nancy, do you have something else?
Just a couple of thoughts. The community forums, do you limit the number of people in any way, or is it as many
No,
people as you
it's
want?
completely open.
Okay.
Completely open. We can
Yeah.
host as many people as possible. Actually, the two ed visioning sessions, we had, over 30 people, Bridget, at both of the ed visioning, and this third one, maybe even more than that. So,
Yes.
Okay, and the other comment is just that we had a major issue that we dealt with in June, where we decided to move away from calling the high school team the Rebels, and we needed to solicit a lot of community feedback there also. We did a sort of a two-part thing where we collected comments that anybody wanted to make, and then we allowed people to speak. And in some ways it started out feeling like it wasn't the ideal way to gather this information, yet we got a tremendous amount of information that way. So, you're right that it can be done remotely. It's not maybe the normal way to do it, but it did work out okay. So
right, and things we've done in the past, in addition to that, Nancy, is we'll start to establish, like, once we start having these community meetings, like, we'll record all of the questions. We'll create a frequently asked question list that'll be published, that can be distributed. People are, if they have a question, they can see if it's been asked before. And again, the community forums can be somewhat of a formal, large attended event, whether it's online or if we have the possibility of doing it in person later. And we can also do smaller ones. I mean, we'll be presenting this project along the way to a lot of different departments, I assume, as well. But we'll do whatever we need to do. I mean, if it's part of information within, the school literature that goes out or whatever, we can adjust whatever we need to do.
great, thank you very much.
I don't think we missed anything informationally from the previous slides. So if anyone has any other questions, I did want to say that we, at this project team, really hasn't lost any time, and we've been very lucky along the whole process, thanks to Patrick, Bridget, everyone on the committee. Mark actually attended the virtual DSP and the MSBA kickoff. We really feel like we hit the ground running with TAP A, and so we've really been able to maximize pretty much everything across the board schedule-wise. and haven't really lost any time due to the pandemic, and that's going to kind of continue to be the MO moving forward. So if we need to add additional outreach meetings, we also do have a not just the website, but we do have an email address now that we will begin to publish, so that if people do have comments or they want to send something along to the team, to the building committee, they can do that. And I'm sure we'll be publishing that in all of the forums, so that if people do want to reach out to us and not be on a public platform doing that, that they will have a vehicle to do that. So I want to thank everyone for getting us to this point. There is a couple of administrative items. I don't think we're going to do the approval of the minutes if we don't have the numbers to do that, but we can review the vendor invoice package, which is a typical thing monthly that we send to the district. Brian, I can bring it up on screen. Yep. if you want to go through it.
Yeah, so this
Tony and Brian, can I just jump in real quick?
Yeah, sure. Yeah,
I know at the end of last week's meeting, we talked about the community outreach, and Jack mentioned it too. That's important. I think we all agree. I think just to follow up on Nancy's statements, if there's a way to meet in person, great, but I also am really mindful of all the changes that the school district hybrid model or regular school model or whatever. So even if we need to push that off a little bit, I don't think anyone would have a problem with pushing it out, but we all agree that we need to hold as many community forums, multiple ones, and make sure that people have input on this process. Agree, Bridget and Mark and Nancy?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. I just wanted to make sure we kind of got that out there, even though we don't have a quorum tonight. I just wanted people to understand that we're going forward, but we're also making the effort to make sure we include everyone, given all the special circumstances.
Right.
Yeah, agreed, Jim. I think everyone would be pleasantly surprised with the amount of participation virtually. I think people are willing to tune in, and whether they are comfortable commenting in those, they definitely have been attending all these virtual meetings on other projects, again, in higher numbers than we typically see. So
yeah, so we'll work with the talented district to get the right date for those, and we'll do as much of the heavy lifting as you need us to, presenting or whatever. But I think once people get back and settled into whatever that new process is, we'll pick a date that works for everyone, and it'll be good.
Okay, good. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, yep. Thanks, Jim. All right, back over to financials.
So quickly, this is a vendor invoice package or VIP. This we started putting together now that we have the designer contract on board. So this goes out every month to the select people you see at the top of the list there. And then this will get presented to this committee every month for the review and approval of invoices moving forward, basically now until the end of the project through construction. So it could be several years of these. If you were familiar with any of the public safety buildings, we did this as well every month. This is so that the committee is up to speed with the financial health of the project. This information gets pulled out and also put into the dashboard that I think you've received the last few months, which is basically a monthly update. We take that at a high level, take this information and put it at a high level. So this is just a quick summary of all the invoices received to date, and we let you know if there's any new commitments or budget impact items that month. So, for example, in June, this is for month ending June, TAP A's contract was added. Tony, if you want to scroll down. And then any other notes that we might have, you'll see a copy of every invoice that's being presented for approval for that particular month. Those invoices and commitments show up on a budget status report. And right now, this is only the feasibility budget for the project. Once we get into a full-fledged design after town meeting and eventually construction, this becomes a page or two long with all the different budget line items. So the committee will be totally up to date every month, like I said, with the financial status. And any changes that need to occur from a budget perspective, we'll bring them to this committee for a vote and approval to manage the budget. We include a report on major contracts. So the Compass contract is in here, the TAP A contract is in here, any amendments or changes. And once we get to, if we get to construction, the construction contract, et cetera.
Brian, this will be just pretty much the same that you presented to us for the public safety and the senior center, right?
Yep, it'll be almost identical, Jack. We'll have a couple more reports that are related to the MSBA. I think Tony was scrolling onto one here at the end.
Yep.
So we'll keep track of any budget transfers. And then the last report that you'll see is actually MSBA related, and it's related to reimbursement. So we track all of the reimbursement requests. So basically Compass will bundle up any invoices, any expenditures for a particular period of time, send it into the MSBA. They will review them, audit it, and then they'll reimburse those expenditures at the agreed upon reimbursement rate. And we'll track that on that last report, so you always know where you stand with the MSBA as far as money coming back to the town.
Okay, thanks. Just
Yep.
to the committee, what Compass provided for the two public safety buildings and the senior center was very complete, easy to follow. Well, pretty much easy to follow. And
I try my best, Jack.
and Brian was very able to answer all the questions that we needed, particularly on change orders. We kind of held your feet to the fire on that.
Yeah, that's to be expected, so not a problem. So yeah, and once we get to construction, we'll have anything construction related as well presented as part of this package, including change orders, like Jack mentioned. So this, I believe this goes out to the group on the distribution list, and then it'll get out to the committee ahead of any of these meetings, and then we'll present them moving forward. Any other questions on the VIP? Okay, so every month the committee is at least going to get the project dashboard, which I think you've seen for the prior months. We'll send it out with the handouts from tonight. You'll get the vendor invoice package. You'll get any of the presentations that we put together, and a lot of the presentations are going to start taking on more design flares to them from TAP A. So you'll get all those handouts as well. So you should get all of that package in advance of a meeting, so you have time to review it, and then all of that will get put up on the websites for public consumption. Other than that, I think that's all we had. Any other general questions?
Not on my end, Brian. I just wanted to thank you guys and TAP A for the introduction and everything. So far, so good. I think we picked a good firm, and I think we're all pretty happy that we're moving forward with this.
Yeah, it
Yes,
should
I
be an
agree.
exciting
Thank you
project.
very much.
Yeah, this is excellent. This is excellent, this meeting. Thank you.
Thanks, folks. Appreciate it.
Good.
Okay.
All right.
Well, thanks everyone.
Well, if that's it, everyone have a good night. Good
Continue
vacation.
to stay safe.
All right, then if we're all set, Brian, is that the end? We don't have to close it because we don't have a quorum, but.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, that's it.
All
All
right.
right, thanks all.
Have a good night, everyone. Stay safe. Good luck,
Bye.
Bridget.
All right.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Charlie. Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Take care,
Patrick.
everyone. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.